The Selma Freedom Marches marked the beginning of the turn of civil rights for blacks. After suffering through oppression since the end of the Civil War, Southern blacks looked to turn their prejudice into freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. led a group of civil rights activists from Selma to Montgomery in 1965 in an attempt to abolish segregation and unfair obstacles for voting as a black citizen in the South. With their marches, King and his followers opposed oppression, police brutality, and inequality. On their first march, police forces brutally assaulted protesters, the event nicknamed Bloody Sunday. The officers were vicious against the activists, using tear gas, billy beaters, and guard dogs to attack them. But the entire massacre broadcasted, the rest of the nation felt sympathy for the activists' cause. Though Alabama police forces thought they thwarted the group, it only empowered them to try harder. On their second march, the activists gained the approval of the general population and safety from the national security. They reached Montgomery, and King gave his speech against the racism of the South. This photograph depicts the notorious Bloody Sunday. As protesters crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, connecting Selma and the path to Montgomery, police stood ready for attack. Then, police using tear gas on the protesters chased those that tried to escape the massacre. Beating them, hundreds of supporters suffered terrible punishment for their strife for equality. All around the South, blacks were treated below whites. To vote, blacks had to pass literacy tests, asking questions no average American citizen could possibly answer correctly, such as the name of the Supreme Court justices or the number of state congressmen. In all cases, bogus questions denied blacks the right to vote, and the oppressed desired change. Segregation ran rampant in the Deep South. Shirley Jefferson, a black woman who participated in the marches as a girl, said she couldn't get ice cream because the restaurant didn't serve blacks. She couldn't go to the movie theater unless she sat in a single balcony. School children were separated by race, and those for blacks were much worse than those for whites. Segregation created a world where the color of your skin decided the benefits you received, and blacks were disadvantaged. Police and Governor George Wallace fueled racism and oppression even further, the governor telling forces to attack all peaceful protesters with water hoses and weapons. The president, LBJ, denied the blacks the right to vote, even after countless meetings with King. Not receiving the rights they deserved, their injustice left the African American population in outrage. Their previous protests proving ineffective, the African American community looked for a movement to catch the attention of the population, and most importantly, the government. The black community created the marches to eliminate the Jim Crow laws, which had segregated and abated them for decades. Giving them the rights they deserved, the abolishment of these laws were necessary for their freedom. The population and government of the South opposed them, and LBJ denied them the right to vote, unopposed. The activists needed an event that would force LBJ to approve a law for their right to vote and equality. This photograph displays the arrival of the group to Montgomery. After 3 days of walking, the activists reached their goal. King and 3,500 of his supporters reached Montgomery on their second march. Televised, the march gave the activists the support they needed from the general population, and more importantly, the president. The march and following speech made by King juxtaposed LBJ and Governor Wallace to give the black community the rights they deserved, and the end of racial prejudice and segregation. Soon after the march, LBJ created the Voting Rights Act of 1965, giving the right for blacks to vote without bogus or unfair obstacles. and many other laws that prevented states from segregating blacks and an overall superiority of whites. The act created a South where a black man could enter any restaurant and not fear to be beat by a police officer for his skin color. King, in his march to Selma, forced LBJ to finally let the black population have the rights that had been held from them. This man is taking down a sign for a bathroom that used to be for whites only, removing the barriers that once faced the blacks. The passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 brought segregation to its demise. Businesses could no longer deny African Americans service, and attacking blacks for no reason dissipated. Children of all colors were integrated into the same schools, finally relieving the issues between white and black schools. Literacy tests, which once denied blacks from voting, had been removed. In general, racial prejudice had been relieved in the South, and left the rebuilding of connecting between whites and blacks. Segregation and its abolishment revealed once again that all people deserve the same rights, no matter the color of their skin. When people are treated as sub-citizens, they will try whatever is necessary to get the rights they deserve. As shown in many cases before, segregation loses in the end. When there are distinct classes, prejudice causes the lower to rebel against the higher in pursuit of rights they weren't given. Racism, in the end, loses, and morality wins, because people shouldn't be separated by their differences, but together with no alienation or prejudice.